Welcome to Faith and Freedom. For the next few minutes, we hope to inform, inspire, and encourage you as we discuss the legal victories and challenges to your fundamental freedoms and religious liberties. Faith and Freedom comes to you from Liberty Counsel, a civil liberties education and legal defense organization. Join us now as Matt Staver, the President and General Counsel of Liberty Counsel, explains the latest legal issues all across this country in the courtrooms of America. Liberty Counsel is winning the battle for your constitutional freedoms.
The Freedom Federation unites behind a balanced budget and low debt ceiling. I'm Matt Barber, Vice President of Liberty Counsel Action and Associate Dean with Liberty University School of Law, in for Matt Staver today. And joining me again in studio is Deryl Edwards, President of Liberty Counsel Action and a Director with the Law School. Last week, the Freedom Federation hand-delivered a letter to all members of the United States Congress expressing a deep concern relative to the national deficit. The letter lobbies for four things. One, that the national deficit be cut by $500 billion now. Two, that spending caps be enacted. Three, that there be a refusal to increase taxes. And four, that a balanced budget amendment be passed. And the letter recognizes the urgency of the United States situation, stating, quote, "We believe that this is a moral, fiscal, and national security imperative that requires immediate attention." The letter is undersigned by members of the Freedom Federation, a combination of multicultural, multi-ethnic, and multi-generational faith-based and policy leaders and organizations representing over 40 million people who are united by one or more core conservative values expressed in the Declaration of American Values. Deryl, the question is, from both sides of the aisle, there seems to be a reluctance to take the very difficult steps that must be taken in order to turn this car around as we careen toward cliff's edge here, with both Republicans and Democrats stomping on the gas here. Something drastic has to be done, and you hear all this talk about going across the aisle and we've got to reach this compromise, and we found that the compromises inevitably that are reached are not nearly enough to actually avert disaster.
Well, in our letter to the congressional leadership, we talked about, and you and I have talked about this before, hitting what's called the debt wall. And sometime in mid-2012, if something is not done, the government will hit a wall, and where drastic things could happen. Right now, we're saying it's about 82%, and when it hits 100%, that's where we're in real trouble, because there is only so much liquidity in the world, and the nations cannot borrow from each other when there's not enough to borrow from. So something has to be done, and they need to put the petty politics aside and take these four steps that we called for in the letter.
Well, that's exactly right. And again, getting a little into the four steps here, that the national deficit be cut by $500 billion right now. And that's just chump change, frankly. I mean, that's not much to ask for when you consider at the rapid rate by the trillions that the national deficit continues to grow. I believe it's, what is it now, 14-something trillion dollars. And unfortunately, President Obama, the Euro style, and there's no other word for it, and this isn't a pejorative, it's not a personal attack to say that the president's policies are socialist or that they are Marxist. That's not a personal attack. They just simply are. And he's trying to apply this big government solution, catch-all solution that has failed over and over again in Europe and elsewhere. Socialism doesn't work. It's never worked. It will never work. Yet those on the left are determined to try it. And a big part of that is this notion that we can somehow spend our way out of our economic woes, troubles. How does that work? Apply it to your own family. If you're in debt, if you have a deficit, how does ramping up your spending with money that you don't have and borrowing from various credit card companies, and how does that help the situation? The credit card companies in this case being China, a communist nation that I'm sorry, does not have our best interest in mind.
And I agree totally with that, and I agree with the Ronald Reagan philosophy that letting people keep more of their own money is not government spending. It was not the government's to start with. So we need to start from that premise that that's how you cut taxes, and you have corresponding budget cuts to equal that. So unleash the power that is in our free enterprise system, which is what Ronald Reagan did in the early 80s when we faced a similar situation after 4 years of Jimmy Carter.
That's exactly right. Well, the second demand, if you will, or if you prefer to use a nicer word, request, is that spending caps be enacted. And we've talked about, spending here. They've got to top off the spendings. They have to make the painful choices to go through. There is so much fraud, waste, and abuse in our federal system. How does growing that fraud, waste, and abuse help us? We've got to go through, and everybody has their pet project. Their earmarks attached to nearly every bill that gets passed through Congress. The bridge to nowheres abound in various legislation for individual people trying to get reelected. It's all very self-centered, very focused on me and my personal career. If you're a U.S. congressman or U.S. senator, it's time for some principled leaders to step forward and put their own neck on the line and say, look, we're going to cut across the board all of these entitlement programs, and where we can't cut, we need to reform to get rid of this fraud, waste, and abuse. And then you have people like Paul Ryan putting out some bold suggestions on Medicare reform, for instance, and he gets the kitchen sink thrown at him from the left with videos of Paul Ryan dumping grandma off a cliff in a wheelchair, and the demagoguery is just absurd. And that's the climate right now where we need to be making these bold decisions in order to literally, save our nation. This could spell the end of America as we know it. If we don't do the right things here, there's no more time for messing around. Right.
And beyond that, as we said in our letter, we told the congressional leadership that the deficit has become a moral issue.
Yeah.
And it's not just because of the controversial activities, which government funds, and there are a lot of those, and that's a whole other show, but because we have a moral duty to leave to our posterity a country that's in good fiscal shape.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, we will lose our liberties, and liberty is our first moral line of defense, because if we do not have our liberty, we will lose the nation.
We talked about this on Monday. You have kids that are older than my kids. I have kids. This is their future that we're talking about. It is immoral for us to be in the back alley rolling dice here in a game of back alley, craps for these kids. Their futures are at stake here. We also talk about that we cannot raise taxes at this time. That is the death knell for any kind of economic recovery. We're not in an economic recovery right now. We're looking at a double dip recession. Newt Gingrich the other night last week in a presidential debate called it the Obama depression. I mean, things are looking really bleak, and raising taxes will only expedite disaster. We don't increase commerce. We don't when we raise taxes. We decrease commerce, and those who are in a position to help give people jobs, the small business owner, corporations, they're unsure right now where they stand. That's why no one's hiring, because they don't know what this president and this liberal-led Senate, for sure, is going to do in terms of raising taxes.
Well, to go back to what I said earlier about Ronald Reagan, Governor Pawlenty said in the Republican debate in New Hampshire that to think that the 5% growth rate is unheard of, it's just a poor thinking, because it could be done. It can be done. And that's what Reagan believed in the people. He believed if you took government off the backs of people and you unleashed the power of the free market, the country could pull itself out. And it actually did that in the longest peacetime, growth rate that there was. But what you have now is an administration who doesn't believe in the people. They believe in the power of government. And everything they have done is backfired.
Well, that's exactly right. Finally, a balanced budget amendment. This has to happen. Folks, our politicians on both sides of the aisle have shown that they don't have the intestinal fortitude to do the right thing and balance the budget unless they're forced to do so. And the only way that they can be forced to do so is if the Constitution demands it. We need a balanced budget amendment that says until you reach the point of balancing the budget, we're not going forward. We're not raising the debt ceiling. There's no more spending. This needs to happen. To learn more about the Freedom Federation, go to freedomfederation.org, and to join in Liberty Counsel's mission, go to lc.org and see how you can help us get this country back on the right path to economic security. Go to lc.org or give us a call at 1-800-671-1776.
You have been listening to Matt Staver of Liberty Counsel. Our hope is to encourage and inspire you to stand up for your faith, family, and freedoms. We can accomplish a lot when we work together. Get informed and get involved today. Sign up for our free monthly newsletter, The Liberator. We will send it out to you free of charge. Stay informed with our Liberty Alert email update. Just click on the website at www.lc.org or call us at 1-800-671-1776. Tune in next time to learn more about your rights right here on Faith and Freedom.